Good morning. Welcome to all who are here and those of you who are on the web. We've got a number of important things to review today in the town hall. Oh, now it's not. There we go. Okay. Overview of the Employee Service Center and the project that will be of interest to all of us who are employees. Coming up, Carolyn Knight-Cole and Joe Blundo will be reviewing that with us and be able to address any questions. If you have a question and you're online, that is being monitored. So we'll be able to pick those up and respond to those. If you have a question in the hall here, please come to a mic or let us get a mic to you. And then secondly, a mid-year review of our financial position. David Moore and Ernie DeSandro will be doing that. There are a number of things in there that are important, including our facilities administrative costs rate changes that are coming up. I mentioned David Moore. I want to introduce him. David Moore is our new Chief Budget Officer, Assistant Vice President for Financial Planning and Budgeting. David is we're very happy he's here, comes to us from George Mason University, where he was in a similar role, but we are very, very pleased that he's here because he brings a wealth of experience that will help us as we are making the budget processes and the budget and analysis, financial planning, and things such as the quarterly reviews and forecasting better and better and better as we go along. And he'll be speaking in just a little bit. I was going to have him do the Employee Service Center just for fun, but you know, that wouldn't quite be fair. So now I'd like to turn it over to Carolyn and Joe.
Morning, everyone. So, that was loud. So before we actually get to the presentation, I wanted to just give you a little bit of history to tell you how we actually got to this point where we're talking about an Employee Service Center. So, it's a little, okay. So we all know we merged, and then when we merged, we understood that we needed to make a lot of changes because we were doing things two ways. We thought two ways. And we needed to align what we were doing as far as policy, as far as process, and et cetera. So one of the first things that we had to work on was our payroll systems, because we had a legacy UMD Banner system, and we had a legacy Rutgers PeopleSoft system. So that was important because we were on two different payroll systems. We paid people differently, and that had to be worked on right away. So then came the migration of the two systems where we selected PeopleSoft. After that, we also recognized that we got a lot of work to do here. We've got policies doing one thing or the same thing on here, on the legacy Rutgers side, legacy UMD side. Same reason, same task, but different ways of doing it. So then we decided that we really need to take a hard look at this. And we created what we call the BPR, which was our business process redesign. And with the business process redesign, we pulled in stakeholders from all over the campuses and talked to them about what we need to do to align these processes. Out of that came a lot of information about how we could align processes and how we could make things easier for our customers, which are you. And during that time, I'll give you an example. So if a person retires, they may have vacation time. And if you were a legacy UMD person, well, payroll paid you out your vacation time. But if you were a legacy Rutgers person, you had to back out your vacation time. And if you wanted to work the time, or your supervisor or where you worked, they needed you to work, you were really an asset, they couldn't do without you for that period of time, you had to get special permission, meaning you had to write up why you wanted to get paid out, and it could only be approved by Vivian Fernandez, who was the senior HR vice president. So that's just a simple one. There were literally hundreds and hundreds of different things that we did. So in the stakeholders group, of course, we found out that there wasn't one or two ways to do it. There were several ways of doing some things, right? Because we had different schools there. We found out they were doing things differently than we were doing, they were doing, and it was just really, really tough. So we came up with a couple hundred different things that we needed to change. We're still doing that, right? So the other part to that, after working on workflows, we figured out processes, we did a lot of work with the groups and trying to figure out how to make things better, piles of policies that need to be changed and aligned. But the other thing that we wanted to know was, for HR, what are your pain points? In HR, how can we better help you? How can we add value to your job? And HR, usually, you know, we always looked at and measured how to help your customers. You need to be more customer-oriented, and not just, you know, smiling when somebody walks in or answering the phone really nice, but customer-centric, meaning we need to be able to help you with your job. You need to have people call you, know they can depend on you, and know that they're going to get the right answer, and they can't call 20 different people, right? The other part to that is some people would call, I know Sally, she helps me no matter what, and they call Sally for everything because they know Sally's going to find out. So in telling us we need a new service delivery model, that's how we came up with, we need a service center. And the service center is going to help us better serve our customers. And that's going to happen by you being able to call one phone number. You won't have to call Sally. You call one phone number no matter where you are, no matter what your question is, and that person is accountable for getting you the answer and held accountable for getting you the answer. We'll build SLAs to talk about, you know, what's the service level agreement, meaning how long is it going to take you to get back to me? And we have to get back to you. It's going to measure how well we're doing what we're doing, because but we're also going to know how long you're on that phone, how long you have to wait, how long you haven't been answered yet, right? So that we can make sure that we meet those requirements. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of history so you can understand why we got where we are. This is going to change the way we do business, but it's definitely going to be it's going to be very good for all of the Rutgers community. And I'm going to introduce Joe Blundo. Joe Blundo is the director of the service center. He's been here for a little while now, helping us out. And thank you very much.
We're good, yep, but I do need the clicker. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hope I can do this right. Hello, everybody. Good morning. As Carolyn mentioned, my name is Joe Blundo, and I think today is my 7-month anniversary, so I am a long in the tooth here. And I have been working very closely and actually aligned with the PMO and John Fahey's group and HR. We have a project manager who he's probably on the phone, Mark Graneri, who's assisting and running this project from the PMO as well. All right, let's see if I do this right. Wrong way. Okay, here we go. So as Carolyn mentioned, we had a lot of different people doing a lot of different things in HR. This slide just talks a little bit about kind of the scope of what we have here at the university. We have 28,000 employees. Now, it's employees, faculty, staff. It's everybody who works at Rutgers. And we're going to also service student workers as well. Today, if you look at where there's HR throughout the organization, there's over 400 people who touch HR. Might be a small percentage of their job, might be a full-time job, okay? Just taking a real quick snapshot of some of the smaller things we do, you can see that we had over 155,000 inquiries to Central UHR, and this was, I believe, 2017 data. And then there was also another 130,000 transactions processed by a group in Central called the HCM group. As you can also see, if you look at the ratio at the number of employees per the number of HR employees, there's about 257 employees to one person who touches HR. So that just gives you an idea of the scope. there's a lot more transactions and inquiries than what we show on this. Those are the things what's being done throughout the organization in the field. That number is a lot greater each year. So why do the service center? Carolyn touched on a lot of this, but number one is to improve the customer experience, okay? You had to know what that person's phone number is, when they were available. We're going to change all that. We are going to have one number, as Carolyn mentioned. Technology in a moment, but an employee will have the ability to put in Google-like searches and be presented articles that might give them the answers to their questions. I say might. Obviously, it's, you know, as good as what you put in for your query is what you're going to get out. You'll also be able to launch cases from there if you choose self-service, right? If you want to understand you want to apply for a leave, you're going to have the ability to do that online and then send that to the service center. We also are going to, in the future, not day one, choice, okay? We want to give people an ability to get to HR in the way that a lot of other folks want to try and figure it out themselves. Focus on employee value add. We're going to use Sally as the example. Let's say Sally sits in the payroll department, and she's doing a lot of difficult payroll transactions, working with Steve. And Steve, by the way, is one of our business sponsors from your group here, Steve Rogue. I should. And Sally's day at Kite and Key, asking to have an automatic deduction to purchase some electronic product. Okay, well now we don't have to interrupt the payroll department. That inquiry can go to the service center. We can verify the person's eligible for that deduction, and Sally can continue on with her more value-added work. Okay, when we announced this to Steve's group, I think I got a standing ovation. So that's one small example of an advantage. Simplify and automate the process. We went through hundreds of processes, and not only did we look to reduce the amount of ways to do things, as Carolyn mentioned, we had multiple ways to do the same thing throughout the university, but we also looked for what we could do to simplify it. Now, we're also realistic. We know that with unions and other contractual obligations, we're not going to be able to get to one process for every single thing we do. But we're trying to limit the different ways that we do things. In essence, that'll simplify the processes. And then, unify the Rutgers experience. Whether you're a day one employee or somebody who's been here 40 years and knows Sally's, first name and her grandchildren's name, you're going to get the same level of service, okay? And you're going to be able to access the customer service center the same way. I keep on doing this the wrong way. This slide just illustrates a lot of what I just spoke of. I am going to point out one bullet that I didn't talk about, which is the center bullet here, which is create transparency. And Carolyn talked about that in her opening statement. One of the things that we heard in feedback in UHR was sometimes things come into UHR and we never hear back, or we don't hear back until it's closed, and it goes in the black hole. Where's my question? Where's my inquiry? By introducing the ServiceNow technology, we're going to eliminate that. When you call, we're going to make a record of you called, when your case was created, we're going to know who owns the case, we're going to be timing it. If it's something that we have agreed to get done within 48 hours, we're going to know at the 36-hour mark, a manager's going to get an alert that your request hasn't been satisfied yet. So the manager's going to be able to go back and follow up with the person who owns the transaction and find out, why isn't it done? What can I do to help you to get it done? Okay? Also, you're going to be able to sign on yourself and see the status of your case. Okay? Maybe the status of your case is sitting on John Fahey's desk and he's not signing it, okay? So I'm trying to pick on him, but he's not listening. So it's going to give people transparency to see what's going on. And additionally, it's going to give us the power of data. We think we know what comes into HR today. We keep some statistics in some areas, but a lot of it's done in the field, and not everybody's using the same methodology. By putting everything in a central system, we're going to know how many inquiries came in, for what type, from what campus, from what job class, and that's going to be powerful to allow us to make decisions on what we should do in the future. For example, if we're getting a tremendous amount of phone calls on the differences of our benefit offerings from Newark. I was told I can't pick on Camden anymore, so I'll pick on Newark. From Newark. We are going to reach out to the folks that work in Newark and say, what can we do to more proactively get a message out to your team, because we seem to be missing something here. We're not getting this message about our benefits offerings correctly. So we're going to use this data to proactively, we hope, improve HR. Okay, the service center will serve every employee, faculty, and staff. In fact, we're trying to lose the word employee and call it faculty and staff. That's something that our marketing campaign will be doing. While the hours haven't been 100% solidified yet, pretty reasonable. We know it's going to be Monday through Friday. Looks like it's 8 to 5, but we have a few finalized conversations to have about that. You will not have the ability to walk physically into the service center, okay, to get customers, not uploaded into a system. They'll have the ability to do that, but that will be separate from going into the service center. However, the people working at that front desk will use the same tools, be trained the same way as the people in the service center. Make sense? Okay. And a big difference that we believe is going to, over time, as people adopt this, is going to be a differentiator, is the employees will have the ability to contact us directly. Today, a common model is I go and I see my HR liaison on my campus or in my school, and that person tries to resolve this on my behalf, and they go to Central and they get information. Now, anytime that we're open or online 24 hours a day, an employee can interact with HR directly and get answers for themselves. We will be located in the ASB 2 building. Construction is underway, and it will be ready for mid-May, which is about the time we might be ready for training. So we'll train in the center. So there were three major sections of the project. The first was design, which included on designing what we're going to look like, identifying the processes, the technology, where's the facility going to be, what's it going to look like, and then beginning the awareness effort, okay, which this is continuing today as we're getting an opportunity to speak to you guys. We are currently in the implement section, and that's where we are implementing the CMS system, which is ServiceNow, case management system, implementing the telephony, which we're using the same system that IT uses for their help desk, Verizon system, fully functional, state-of-the-art call center technology. We're working on, we're developing our training programs. We're working with continuing education docs, who's helping us craft the day one training. And then getting the organization ready for change. We know that the person who knows Sally and has been accessing Sally for the last 25 years doesn't really want to lose that connection with Sally, is resistant to change, and we need to get the organization ready that this is the new way we're going to do business. And frankly, employee service centers are not new, okay? They've been around for a long time. I worked in my first one in 2007 or 6 when I helped implement this for the New York City Department of Education. So it's in the public sector. The private sector, it's commonplace, and I've had an opportunity to experience that as well. And in higher ed, it's being adopted more and more. Higher ed's trailing a little bit in the adoption of this concept of employee service center, okay? Many of you may know a group of us went to the University of Michigan and took a look at their fully baked service center and the successes that they've had. But a lot of the Big Ten schools, Indiana and others, have followed the same path, and schools outside of the Big Ten. I've talked to Virginia, Clemson, and have all had levels of success with an employee service center. So this is not unique to Rutgers. The last stage, and it begins after implementation or at implementation, is optimize. In my opinion, optimization never ends. So we're going to get started, we're going to hit the ground running, okay? But we're constantly going to be looking for ways to be better, to be more efficient, to bring in new things to the service center. One of the experiences I had with the NYC DOE was payroll, for example, not to put you on the spot, Steve, was very reluctant to give a lot of the processes up. At the beginning, they gave a very little bit. The service center proved their capabilities, and by the time I left there, they were payroll there was asking us to do more and more. They were seeing the value add. So we're constantly going to be looking for ways to add more to the service center and constantly looking for ways to continually improve the process. We spent a lot of time designing the processes. This is just a snapshot of the hours spent. We have a functional team that's been removed from their day-to-day job for the last year, focusing on identifying every process that's going to be in the service center, rewriting it, not in a vacuum, but working with subject matter experts throughout the university, bringing them in or going to visit them to understand what are their needs and how we need to process the things to support them. So a lot of time was done. We also had a customer insight group. One of the things that we felt was very important to do was to make sure that we included as many stakeholders as possible in the process. We didn't want to wake up one day and say, here's your new service center, and people say, here they go again, they're just doing something to us. So there's a group of about 39 people, I believe is the number, of people that are anything from business managers to HR experts in a school or on a campus that we met with regularly. We got feedback from them, what they liked about this concept, what their concerns were, where would we be able to help them the most. And we had 21 sessions with these 39 people, got a tremendous amount of feedback. We will continue to meet with these folks after we go live so they can tell us what's working, what's not working, and what they would like to see more of. So communication is a key, and that's something that Michigan pounded in our heads. You need to talk to the folks out there and let them know what's going on. So I want to stop here for a moment and talk about the tier structure in the service center, okay? So I talked about self-service, and we refer to that as tier 0. That's I go out and I try, as a customer employee, try and help myself. In the service center, there's going to be 2 levels of employees. There's going to be tier 1, which is kind of envision it like your traditional call center. You call, you speak to somebody who's been trained in general knowledge of HR and payroll, and will have the ability to answer any question in HR and payroll. Now, when I say have the ability, they're either going to know the answer, they're going to be able to look it up in our system, or they're going to be able to recognize this is outside my ability to help you, and I'm going to get you to the right person. But what's not an acceptable answer is you've called the wrong place and go on. They are going to be required and be held accountable to get to the right person if they don't have the answer. And day 1, when we go live, which is summer of 2019, so it's coming up, they will be ready to handle any inquiry, okay? But then there's tier 2 in the service center. And certain functions are coming into the service center that are going to be processed in the service center. For example, benefits enrollment, some of the HCM things. So in those cases, there'll be employees in the service center who will have cases routed to them that this leave of absence needs to be entered or this data change needs to be made on behalf of an employee. And they will sit in the service center, okay? They will also be available for escalated phone calls. A phone call that needs a little more subject matter expertise, that goes beyond what the tier 1 person can handle, could be transferred to a tier 2 person who may be more expert in benefits or payroll or HCM or leaves. we had to decide which items are going to go into the service center for Tier 2 on day one. So it was a phasing strategy. We needed to decide what things that are being done somewhere else in the university or in central HR in a different department were going to come into the service center day one. So we really used two criteria to make that decision. What provided the biggest bang and help to the university, and what was ready? What was low-hanging fruit? What things we could move without a lot of pain? So that's what that slide dictates. And I'm going to talk about it in a moment. We've identified what's going to go in Phase 1 and Phase 2. And here they are. So again, keeping in mind that Tier 1 will be able to handle everything across the board, the Tier 2 items that will go in the service center day one are personal data changes. I'm not going to read them all. The kite and key deductions, benefits. We're going to come back to OEE and OLR. Payroll services, pending job change repository, and probably the biggest thing that we heard from the university as we went out on our field shows was leave administration. What we heard from the field was leaves are difficult, inconsistent, we need help. And it's a risk point because when we're doing those differently, if I'm approving a leave in a certain school or a certain campus one way, and another area is not, we're now not treating employees consistently. So to centralize that, we believe we remove risk and we take some of the pain that's affecting our field staff away from them. OEE and OLR, the service center is not going to handle the actual grievances or complaints. The only reason that's listed on the slide is we are going to use the technology to track when they come in. When a call comes in, and the minute we hear it's a labor relations issue or an OEE issue, we're going to get that to the appropriate department. That department is going to use our technology, and only they will be able to view it, but they'll be able to track it, date it, stamp it, and be able to report on it more robustly than they do today. So I didn't want to let anyone think we're going to handle these very sensitive items. We will not be. Phase 2, we're going to add in absence reporting, HRIS data requests, things that we call operation like I-9 processing, things of that nature. The rest of HCM, which is the employee job data, and recruitment of staff. And when I say recruitment of staff, we're not going out and identifying the candidates, but we're going to assist the managers and get the postings up, do the administration things in a central way to assist the managers in the various schools, and then extend the offer letter when we're directed to do so. As you can see, we list up there 3 to 12 months post-go live. That's a big window. Why are we giving ourselves 9 months? Because we need to make sure that we get Phase 1 correct. We are not going to go to Phase 2 until we have nailed down Phase 1. And we know we'll have growing pains. We know that there will be things we didn't anticipate. We know there will be glitches. We're going to work them out. We're going to ask that the people in the field that see them work with us to fix them and to address them. When we're ready, we'll embark on Phase 2. Now, Phase 3, I use the word aspirational, and that is to get the faculty, staff, services, recruiting, handle that centrally. Very sensitive. We got to be really ready to do that. So we're not even putting a date on that at this point. But it is something that is on our radar, something that we want to do. This slide, I'm not going to talk about it much. I've weaved most of this in there. What are some of the benefits of doing all of this? We believe that centralizing some of the benefits work will decrease the likelihood of overpayments because it'll be done by a special group that's focused on this. Overpayments are another messy business, right? We have to go back and get the money. It's not a pleasant thing to tell an employee that we overpaid you. Consistency and clarity. Automation, autonomy, so that employees can get things done themselves and not have to rely on somebody else. For leave of absences, we're going to reduce the occurrences of when an employee, by law, they don't have to tell their manager why they're going out for a leave if it's an illness. By centralizing it in Service Center, that even limits the exposure of that even more. The manager will be notified that so-and-so applied for a leave. It's been approved. Here's the length of time. And the HR partner will be notified as well. But that person does not have to talk to the manager, which could lead to awkward conversations depending on the condition. So we're getting ready for implementation. The portfolio of services has been developed, as we talked about, and how they're going to develop. The organizational structure is in place. It still says pending approval. You know, we're working on tweaking a little bit, but Vivian has pretty much accepted how the staffing model is going to be. The initial plan and staffing plan, we're working out details with Vivian now. The training we're working on, as I mentioned, with docs and continuous ed, and we're very much on schedule there. The case management system, I think we're in about week 3 of implementation at this point, and we're well on the way to getting that ready. Future state process documentation, we're documenting everything. So we're setting up SOPs. Every process that we handle is being documented in a consistent manner. And the facility plan is completely on track, and it's going to be something we're going to be proud of. I did it again. I was doing better. We talked about some of this. I'll talk about the development of knowledge management content. Those are the articles that are going to be presented to either a self-service inquiry, right? So there's hundreds of articles. I want to take a leave of absence. You know, okay, and then articles will come up on my staff and my faculty, and you pick the one that's appropriate for you. Developing the SOPs. We're going to drop the word service level agreements, but we are going to have some type of contract with our employees, some type of way to say this is what you can, these are the standards you can hold us to. Okay, but we don't like the word service level agreement. Most of this I've gone over. Second to last bullet is a key one, and that's preparing the community, the Rutgers community, to accept the change. Making sure that people embrace this. We ask that if those of you here, if you're in an opportunity, be our advocates and be our champions, okay? If somebody has questions and you know the answer because you've seen this presentation, we hope that you can help create some momentum and, you know, give a positive report on it. Obviously, people will be able to contact us directly. And of course, we're going to do extensive UAT testing before we go live. So I mentioned ServiceNow. We looked at 3 comparable technologies: Oracle, Salesforce, or things that you may have heard of or we're using other places in the organization. It's going to track the cases. It's going to be where the knowledge tool sits, where people will query. It's going to be the base for everything we do. We will have the ability to submit tickets online, and eventually we'll roll out live chat. It'll be the same tool that if you query self-service or our customer service rep needs to get more information because they're not familiar with your inquiry, you're querying the same place. So you're going to get consistency in your answer, whether you do it yourself or whether your customer service rep does it if you choose to call. So how to reach us? We have a website. There's a really fancy video out there with Carolyn's voice on it, so I encourage you to all go. She doesn't like when I say that. There's an email address. Obviously, you can reach us directly, Carolyn or myself, if you have questions. As I mentioned, there's a website and a video, and that's really it. It'll be updated as we move forward. Any questions? Stephanie.
A question came in online, whether the service center will support student employees.
It will. Student employees are in our scope. Anybody that is an employee or an applicant or a retiree of Rutgers University will have the ability to get some answers. Any other questions? Only one online? Okay. Going once? Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for giving us this forum. And again, if you have questions, you know how to reach us. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm very excited to be here at Rutgers University and look forward to working with each of you. So there's a couple things I would like to cover today. First, I would like to kind of talk a little bit about building blocks for financial planning. In addition to the FY 2019 Q2 forecast, budget timelines, some key dates to mention, and also some training resources. So first, let's talk about building blocks. The university has implemented a couple of building blocks for budget or for financial planning. First is the Enterprise Planning and Budget Cloud Service, EPBCS. This service application allows you to get down to the detail level of revenue and expenditures. It allows you to do forecasting, and in addition to, it allows you, especially when we get into the detail expenditures, we look at also to the workforce planning as well. The other application is the Profitability and Cost Management Cloud Services, the PCMCS.
I'm going to have to mic you.
Okay. Good? Excellent. All right. So just kind of quick overview. Two systems, the EPBCS, which allows us to have detailed information on our revenue and expenditures, which then allows us to have an income report. And in addition to the PCMCS, which allows us to develop and allocate our cost pools and out to our responsibility center management, which is part of our responsibility center management model. Next item I want to talk to you about is talking about the forecast in EBCS. The clear thing that we were able to do is in FY 2019 Q2 forecast, we were able to look at what was happening at the end of, if you will, December. What we saw was increasing revenues and a slight increase in overall expense. Revenue totals was $4,359,000,000. And expense totals was $4,331,000,000. Total surplus of about $27.4 million, or what is roughly about a favorable increase of $15 million over the approved budget that we had for FY 2019. With the system, what we've been able to do is really get down into the details and understand where the increases have been. So in revenues, major increases were in tuition and fees, primarily due to enrollment growth, favorable increases in contracts and grants, and also to favorable increases in our endowment and investment income. On the expense side, very, very small increase in the overall expense forecast, and that is primarily due to the enrollment growth activity that we see. As we get into the budget timeline, a couple things that we really want to point out here is, as we're really heavy deep into the FY 2020 financial planning, what we want to point out is a couple of key dates, but also to a key date for as we're finishing up FY 2019. So first key date that I have circled here is April 26th. This is when final budgets are due from the units, for both central units and also chancellor units, to the budget office. What we will do at that time is consolidate all these budgets into overall university budget or financial plan that we will present to the Board of Governors later in July. The other key date that I want to point out is our fiscal year 2019 Q3 forecast. Again, as the forecast for Q2 that you saw previously, it's very helpful for us to understand kind of how we're going to end the fiscal year. Those dates are May 8th for central units and May 14th for chancellor office units. Other key dates here, I've mentioned the Board of Governors meeting in end of July. These will be provided to you, these slides, but other key dates are important too, with either FNF committee meetings or other meetings for the state as well. And just some resources, again, as we're deep into the final phase of our FY 2020 financial planning and development, and also to getting ready for the Q3 forecasting. Just key things that we have available for us, so some training resources. So EBBCS, we have, if you need support, please feel free to call the budget office. We'll either help you at that time or set up a time that we can work with you and your colleagues as you're working through the systems. EBBCS manuals can be found on the Canvas website. In addition to, we've provided some other resources. So if you go to the Office of Budget or Budget Office website, you'll find a fantastic white paper on forecasting. In addition to some policies, accounting policies and procedures on the Controller's Office website. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ernie to talk a little bit more about F&A rates.
You hear me okay? Good morning, everybody. Thank you. David, thanks for that wonderful introduction to F&A. One of the cool things that I get to do is talk about and do some training for the folks out into the field. And then I learn through the process of teaching. And this is a result of some of the work that we did. Whether or not you've noticed it or not, we did a couple of communications early in the month of March. One where we communicated that we negotiated our final, our next F&A rates. That was issued back on March 7th. And then about a week later, we issued the announcement on our finalization of the fringe rates. And then we actually implemented that into the system in PeopleSoft that went in on March 25th, and then it should be available for you all to see. I know there was some communication potential where we had a little misstep. We had a typo in one of our distribution lists. But all of these items are available on the controller's website as well. But as we were trying to think about what does this mean, what does this new negotiated rate mean, how are we going to get it out to the field and discuss these topics, we collaborated with the folks in ORED, so the finance area collaborated with both pre and post award as well as in the grant and contract accounting side. And we also brought in our friends in the compliance under Tim Fournier's office, really to help us get a consistent message at the university level so that as folks were dealing with this information, they had a good chain of understanding, and that from the top down, everybody had that same baseline as it relates to F&A rates. So this presentation is really a result of that collaboration, and know that it's sponsored from Mike Gower and Dr. Kimball as well as Tim Fournier. And they're sharing it amongst their peers as well. So this information is something that we wanted to get out to the field really as a baseline. So before we get started, just some fun facts and figures regarding our research and development costs. Primarily, this is related to the information that's publicly available in our HERD survey or our Higher Education Research and Development Survey. In 2017, Rutgers had $712 million in annual research expenditures. Well, that's more than all of the universities and schools in New Jersey combined, right? A huge number. Over 300 research centers and institutes around the state, growing at a rate of about 4% per year. We're expecting the same thing in FY18, a 4% growth in research and development. But embedded in that, in fiscal year 18, 3,400 research awards, 74 of them were over $1 million. Again, thank you so much for all the folks that go into gathering and putting this data together, putting the proposals together, and really helping us get to where we are. We have a lot to be thankful for. and proud of. Okay, so some real facts, some fun things, and we borrowed a lot of this from our friends at the Education Advisory Board, or EAB. These are not slides that we that we doctored up in any way, but they're good slides in providing a baseline of what are facilities and administrative costs. So most of the time when you think about the costs related to research, it's probably going to be these direct costs. It's obvious to talk about lab supplies, research equipment, the salary of the researchers, et cetera. But what's less obvious are, the costs related to the building you're doing the research in, the depreciation and the interest on that building, the operations and maintenance of it to keep the lights on, as well as the administrative costs, right? The facilities costs are one thing, but the administrative costs at the sponsored research level, at the department level, and at the general administration level. Those are all things that are covered under what we would think of as F&A costs. And these are costs that are specifically, although they can't be attributed to any one project, they're generally applicable. Without these buildings, you couldn't do the research, right? So there's a piece of that goes into that. How is the rate determined? Well, there's a rigorous process, and we should talk about this for a little bit. We haven't really negotiated a rate in over 10 years. Most of it was due to the integration with UMDNJ. That was a reason to allow these provisional rates to go on. And then we had the implementation of our new financial system, which also gave us a little bit of wiggle room in terms of allowing us to extend that provisional rate. But the time has come to actually work through this, and we're pretty proud. So what went into the rate setting process? We have a lot of rules that we need to follow as we accumulate these costs. These rules are set forth by the Office of Management and Budget. That rate is what we try to follow those rules, and we file a rate. And then, like any other negotiation, our cognizant agency, the person who is actually responsible for it, in our case is DHHS, or the Department of Health and Human Services. They get to inspect those costs, and we negotiate this process to actually come up with the rate. And then once the rate's determined, that negotiated rate is applied to a subset of the direct costs for each of the research projects. So that negotiated rate is used for all agencies, right? It's not something we negotiate different rates for different agencies, okay? And then some interesting information on the right-hand side in terms of our trends and nationally. F&A rates nationally range from 20% to 85%. The average F&A rate is sitting at 53%, and then we were able to negotiate a combined rate in fiscal year 19 of 55%. Okay. When we start thinking about rolling this out, we also wanted to talk about some of the common misconceptions or myths about the F&A rate. And some of these we tried to highlight from our friends at EAB, but we also thought were important to discuss here. One of the myths is that direct costs are the only real costs, and that F&A diverts dollars from my real research. Well, in fact, F&A costs are real costs. Without the buildings and things like that, we wouldn't be able to conduct any research. Another myth is that F&A is centrally administrative, and it's a tax on research that allows the university to profit. And we want to be careful to talk about, these are partial reimbursements. We really never get all of our F&A or all of our overhead paid for, as we'll discuss in the next slide. But this is really only a partial reimbursement of the costs that we've already incurred, right? And so the next myth is that F&A is arbitrarily determined and represents a slush fund for universities, providing little benefit to the researchers. Well, We talked about a little bit about how that rate is calculated. It's a negotiation process. There's a lot of math and details that goes into it. So it's not just some arbitrary number. But that process allows us to recover some of our overhead expenses so that we can then reinvest it in the research of the university. And I think that's a real important distinction there, especially when you think about these statistics I'm going to show you on the next slide. Okay, so in fiscal year 18, the university, because we were working under two different rates, RBHS had a different rate than Legacy Rutgers. Our blended rate, what we were able to charge, negotiated for all of our research, was 54%. Our effective rate, what we actually collected for all of our research, was only 29%. Now, that's not uncommon, right? Most of the times, first of all, the federally negotiated rate is less than the actual cost. Administrative portion is capped at 26%. There are some places where they don't even pay F&A, like foundations and things like that. So it's not normal, it's not abnormal to have an effective rate that's less than your blended rate. But nationally, when you compare us nationally, the national effective rate was 34%. Now let's throw some of these numbers to it. The difference between 54% and 29% means that we had $88 million of unrecovered F&A expense. That's costs that we had incurred as a university that we were unable to recover. Okay, if we just moved the dial a little bit and tried to get the average from 29 to 34%, that would move us, and that would help us achieve another $17 million in that. And so it's real important that we wanted to share this information to build the awareness so that when people are creating proposals, et cetera, that they do look at these in conjunction with that. Okay, we have a couple slides here just to give you some additional background. Again, some of these I probably have already talked about, but the reality of the F&A rates and the negotiated process is that not everybody pays, it's always less than the actual cost. And if they all paid it, if everybody paid at 54%, we still wouldn't get all of our costs reimbursed. But we wanted to stress the importance of applying the F&A rate and really letting people understand that it's for costs already incurred. It's not for things that we haven't done yet. And then the recovery is a critical component to the university. And it helps us, done correctly, it helps us reinvest into research across the university. And last but not least, right, on this slide, we do need to understand that we have to have at least an awareness or sensitivity to the impact on the principal investigator, right, on their perspective. And the challenge that it brings, right, realizing that waiving or lowering the applicable F&A rate in their minds moves more dollars to the direct cost. And I think that that's something we just need to work through. And again, just raising the awareness of will hopefully just move the dial, little by little into the right direction or into the direction that we need in order to recover all of our costs. Some final thoughts just on the F&A rate and the application of the rate. We are going to be offering a lot of training and open sessions, which I'll talk about in the next slide. But a lot of it has to do with just making people aware of what the modified total direct cost definition is, how that's applied, and making sure that folks understand not all the costs on a research grant are charged F&A. And so, there's a lot of technicalities, trying to get that rolled out. That the federal research awards generally must apply, they must be charged the F&A rate negotiated with the federal government. There are some federal awards that don't pay that rate, but it's very few and very specific. In the rare case, this should be rare cases where sponsors may be charged a different F&A rate. We have to understand that it's things that have been approved at the university level, but more importantly by our cognizant agencies, so that we can't arbitrarily assign and change F&A rates. We really need to go back to DHHS and ask them to approve a rate that's lower if we're going to charge a different sponsor for that rate. A little bit of, housekeeping here in that our use of the DUNS numbers, or the Data Universal Numbering System. As part of our agreement, we're trying to simplify the process. Right now we have over 13 DUNS numbers. 9 of them are in RBHS units. And the movement will be to slowly phase into getting into a specific single EIN or DUNS number. That won't always be real possible, but we're going to move towards where we can make those improvements. And we still need to work through the decision process on that, and certainly the change, and we'll be working with all the units as we roll that out as well. Quick shot of the rates. The ones that I've been talking mostly about have been the organized research rate, but we did negotiate rates that went all the way out to fiscal year 23. So we don't anticipate doing another negotiation for a couple of years. But you should be aware that there is, there are different rates. So for fiscal year 19, we're moving to a single F&A rate for the entire university. So we'll no longer have a separate rate from RBHS and Rutgers. That in 21, or from fiscal years 20 and 21, that rate jumps up a point to 56%, and then for fiscal years 21 and, for fiscal years 22 and 23, that rate jumps up to 57. And that's really just a recognition of, we had a couple research buildings that are going online. They weren't online at the time that we negotiated the rates, or they weren't fully up to speed, but we were able to negotiate that by fiscal year 23, we'll be able to get higher rates as a result of that. Now, there's a lot of moving parts here, right? There's a lot of awards and contracts that are in flight. There's a lot of projects that are in flight, and this would have a lot of impact on that. Again, our colleagues in ORED, as well as folks in the controller's office and compliance, will be hosting open sessions. We've already rolled it out internally to the folks in ORED. Yesterday we met with the RAIN group and rolled this out. We had actually a little more detail behind these slides, and we gave them specific examples about which contracts are happening. I just left the Council of Research Deans for RBHS meeting, which was this morning, and then this town hall. So this particular presentation is getting a lot of traction this week, and then there'll be more. So open sessions are going to be scheduled across all the campuses. We also are incorporating this training into the training that the compliance office delivers around research and development, so we'll be ongoing training for this. We have, of course, all of our contact information of the folks that you may have direct questions with here. And then for people who did not get the announcements, as we always do, we post all of our information on the controller's website. This is in our cost analysis website, which has the rate that you saw earlier and the official agreements that we signed. So I want to thank you for being attentive. Do you have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ernie and David. And just open up for any other questions, either online or in the group here. Okay. Well, with that, we'll call the town hall to a close, and thank you all for attending, being part of the communication, as usual, we would like to, is it up there? The feedback? Oh, no. If you have any suggestions or feedback, please send email to finance@rutgers.edu. That's our general mailbox. Every email that goes to there is reviewed and gotten to the right person, but we would love to get feedback from you on this. And thanks to everybody who was here to support the town hall. Take care.